The Bayano Caves, roughly 31 miles, about 48 kilometers east of Panama City, are a natural wonder, a place carved by water over millions of years, where limestone walls stretch like cathedrals and underground rivers wind through the darkness. On November 21st, 2021, a group of 16 people gathered there for what should have been a routine tour: 11 locals, 4 Venezuelan tourists on vacation, and a Canadian traveler with camera gear ready to document the experience. And their guide? A seasoned pro. Over 10 years of experience, hundreds of successful tours. As they passed a local man outside the entrance, he waved at them.
Hi.
Just another group heading into the cave for some sightseeing. The guide pointed out rock formations, told stories, cracked jokes. It felt like a perfect day to explore. But above ground, something was changing. Panama's rainy season had been calm for days, but on this particular morning, a storm system was silently moving in. About an hour into the tour, the atmosphere underground shifted. The guide stopped mid-sentence. He turned his head, listening. A sound, subtle but growing, echoed through the tunnels. The gentle dripping of cave water had become something else. A rush, a rumble. Then it hit him. He shouted for the group to move. Now. Water was coming fast. Above, the storm had broken open. Sheets of rain crashed down, turning dry forest paths into flash rivers. And all that water, it was heading underground, straight into the caves. Water poured in from all sides. Dry tunnels turned into torrents. Slick rock became nearly impossible to cross. And then, something unthinkable happened. The guide, the one person who knew the cave like the back of his hand, slipped. From that moment on, chaos. The guide's headlamp shattered as he hit the rocks. 1 second, he was reaching to help someone cross a slick ledge. The next, he was gone, swallowed by the flood. The group tried to grab him. One tourist even lunged forward, fingertips grazing his soaked sleeve. But the current was too strong. And still, as the water dragged him deeper into darkness, the guide kept shouting, directions, warnings, trying to save the others, even as the cave was taking him. Then, silence. 15 terrified people were left behind. No guide, no clear path, just the roar of rising water and the cold grip of panic. They scrambled to stay together, slipping and clinging to slick walls. One tourist, the Canadian, used the flash on his camera to light the way forward. Quick bursts of light revealing half-flooded tunnels and water rushing past their knees. Then their waists. In the confusion, disaster struck again. A man lost his footing and was gone. Another, a young woman, tried to help him and was swept away in seconds. There was literally nothing anyone could do. 13 remained. Soaking wet, freezing, and blinded by darkness, they pushed forward through flooded chambers. Their headlamps flickered low, batteries dying. Every step forward was a gamble. Meanwhile, above ground, the local man who had waved to them that morning was growing uneasy. Hours had passed. The storm raged on, but the group hadn't come back. He called emergency services. When rescuers arrived, they were met with an ominous sight. Water gushing from the cave mouth. No way in. No way to know what waited below. Inside, the survivors had found a narrow chamber above the floodline, cramped, silent, pitch black. They held on to each other. Some prayed, and others simply shut down. The water had stopped rising, but they didn't know if they'd ever get out. Hours later, rescue teams reached them. The injured were pulled out and taken to a medical center in the Chepo district. The guide's body was recovered the next day. The other 2 victims were found nearby, their gear still strapped to them. They went in expecting a scenic cave tour. What they got was a life-or-death struggle inside one of nature's most unpredictable traps. The morning of May 2nd, 1976, was crisp and calm across the Yorkshire Dales. 6 members of the Newcastle University Caving Club laced up their boots, checked their gear, and prepared for another underground challenge. Their destination, Langstroth Pot, a rugged cave system near Upper Wharfdale, famous for its vertical drops, cold streamways, and a tight underwater passage known as a sump. The group, Martin Blackburn, Brian Fox, Donald Southern, and 3 fellow cavers, had trained together for months. They knew each other's strengths, trusted each other's instincts, and had tackled plenty of difficult caves. At the time, cave diving was still evolving. They weren't using fancy scuba gear, just pure lung power. The idea was simple. Take a deep breath, duck underwater, pull yourself through, and pop up in the next chamber. Seemed simple enough, until it wasn't. They moved confidently through the twisting passages, rappelling down wet drops and squeezing through narrow crawls until they reached the sump. The water was dark but calm. One by one, the first trio, Martin, Brian, and Donald, submerged. Seconds later, they surfaced in what appeared to be a perfect air pocket. No signs of distress and no reason for concern. The others waited at the entrance, expecting a signal to follow. Minutes passed, then more. Still no sound, no call, no splash. What no one realized was that the air in that hidden chamber was poisoned. Not some weird chemical leak, just carbon dioxide, the same stuff we breathe out every second. Down there, in that tiny chamber, it had quietly pushed out all the oxygen, maybe from decomposing stuff in the water, maybe just from the cave being sealed too tight for too long. Either way, it looked like air, it felt like air, but every breath they took was slowly choking them. They were just catching their breath, thinking they'd made it, but something felt off. Their heads started spinning, arms felt like dead weight, and their thoughts got fuzzy. Before they even realized what was happening, they were fading, one by one, slipping under the water. They didn't drown. They just ran out of air without even knowing it. When the rescue teams finally got in, they found the bodies just floating there, still, silent, like they were sleeping. It was eerie. The air was still deadly, so even the rescuers had to wear breathing gear just to stay in the chamber without passing out themselves. Martin, Brian, and Donald didn't mess up. They followed all the right steps, at least by what people knew back in the 70s. This wasn't some reckless mistake. It was something no one could see, smell, or predict. A silent killer nobody even thought to look out for. July 1996. It was one of those hot, windless days where the air just hangs heavy and everything feels kind of slow. Somewhere near a spot called Hidden Falls, 24-year-old climber Sam Meyer stood at the edge of what looked like just a harmless little hole in the ground. From the surface, it didn't look like anything special, just a gap between some massive granite boulders, deep, maybe 20-30 feet. Nothing he hadn't tackled 100 times before. Sam was no rookie. He'd scaled cliffs across California, free-climbed routes others avoided, and had the kind of quiet confidence that comes from surviving bad weather and worse decisions. But on this particular day, one bad choice would cost him everything. He had all his gear for going down, rope, harness, carabiners, but nothing to get himself back up. No ascenders, no Prusik loops, no plan B. In climbing terms, that's like rolling downhill in a truck with no brakes and just hoping it all works out. Of course it won't. Still, it looked easy. Just pop down, have a look, and climb back out. Seemed simple enough. Until it wasn't. The first 50 feet, smooth sailing, just granite walls and falling shadows. But as he dropped lower, something changed. The shaft narrowed, the light faded. At 100 feet, he could touch both sides with his hands. At 125 feet, nearly 40 meters, he finally touched bottom, or at least that's what he thought. Because instead of solid ground, his boots punched straight through the surface of an ice-cold underground pool. Water that had probably been sitting down there forever. The kind of cold that doesn't just shock you, it locks you up. In that moment, he knew. He'd messed up. Big time. Every time he tried to lift himself, his feet slipped. The granite walls were too smooth. The rope, dangling above, was useless without something to climb it. And the freezing water? It was pulling the strength out of him one shiver at a time. At first, he fought it, tried everything, hand-over-hand rope climbs, chimneying between the walls, planting his feet and hauling upward. But every attempt failed. Every splash soaked him more. The cold was getting inside him. And hypothermia, that one doesn't make a lot of noise. First, you're shivering like crazy, then your brain starts fogging up, and before you even realize what's happening, it's lights out. Your body just checks out. Sam's rope stretched up into darkness, anchored just a few feet from where tourists snapped photos above. No one heard him. No one even knew he was down there. It wasn't until days later, when friends reported him missing, that park rangers started looking. And even then, they almost didn't find him. It wasn't until one of the rangers spotted Sam's rope still anchored to the boulders that they realized, yeah, something was definitely wrong. So they called in a rescue team, and one specialist got lowered down into the gap. Nice and slow, no room for mistakes. And when he finally reached the bottom, there was Sam, floating quietly in the freezing water. No struggle, no noise, just gone. It took an entire rescue team, ropes, pulleys, the whole setup, just to get him out of a hole he'd dropped into in minutes. What he did alone took a dozen people to undo, and the craziest part, just a few feet above him, life was going on like normal. Tourists snapping photos, kids running around. No one had any idea that right below them, a guy was losing his life.